Welcome everyone to today's webinar in our series, Transparency is the New Green in Product Selection, Specification, and Procurement. We're thrilled today to have three illustrious members of leading industry associations, Copper Development Association, PEMA, and Natural Stone Institute, to talk about product transparency in today's global economy and give their right from the source perspectives, everything from transparency to tariffs, and what's happening globally. So to set the stage, industry associations are continually working behind the scenes to promote the members, the people in their industries, to create standards, regulations, making sure that there's a level playing field, and you'll hear from each of these individuals to talk about different aspects of what their associations are doing. But these particular ones, and there are many others, have really dug into leading their industries around product transparency initiatives, understanding from already long ago that it is the industry association's responsibility as standard setters and leaders to really instigate every type of reporting standards and now product transparency, and make it easy for their members to get it done. And you're going to see when you hear from each of these presenters that product transparency investments are happening at different levels in different industries, simply because of what each of the industries are, but also because every industry still needs market demand for transparency to encourage manufacturers to continue to invest in more EPDs and material ingredient disclosures. So they're going to talk about that too, why it's more important than ever to continue to ask for and reward manufacturers investing in transparency. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing with the transparency catalog now with Project Builder and Library, where we've made it possible to drive demand for transparency within your user experience in the catalog by being able to click a button to send an email to us to request that we contact the manufacturer to create EPDs and material disclosures and to activate their listings in the catalog to make their products with transparency information even easier to select, specify, and procure. So with that, what we're going to cover today in this order is a little bit more about Sustainable Minds and the Transparency Catalog and the relationship that we have with these organizations. Sarah will go next, talking about what's happening at Natural Stone, followed by Justin from PEMA and Erin at Copper Development. And if there's still time, I'll give you a little bit more insight into the Project Builder and Library capability and this on-demand request capability to drive, again, demand for transparency. So for those of you who are new to Sustainable Minds, we are the only end-to-end product transparency solutions provider in the market today for the design and construction industry. So what does that mean? We deliver PCRs and EPDs, and our focus, differentiated from any other program operator, is that we care about making the information in EPDs understandable to regular people and making it meaningful to how the manufacturer is actually making products and creating improvements so that people can make better informed decisions based on understandable information, both in EPDs and material health reporting. We also deliver LCA services and material ingredient development services, training, education, and of course, we've got digital and virtual tools to help get products into projects to transform the built environment. And our leading tool is the Transparency Catalog that contains a number of other digital tools built in. So this just gives you an overview. Here's our technical program. Our transparency reports are unique as EPDs delivered in the cloud. They're explanatory marketing tools that also include the content required to be in an EPD and the transparency catalog. So we work with all different kinds of organizations, from industry associations to manufacturers, across their transparency journey on the parts that they need support with. So for some industry associations, we're developing PCRs. You can see here with Natural Stone, went on the entire journey with them, and with some manufacturers and industry associations, we're focused just on the transparency catalog and making their content available across the industry to the manufacturers who have participated and to the users who are going to select products in those categories. So a little bit about the Natural Stone Institute relationship, and you'll certainly get a deeper dive from Sarah, but several years ago, we worked with NSI to develop 3 industry-wide transparency reports, we call our EPDs, for flooring and paving, stone cladding, and countertops. And you can see right on the front, here are all of the participating organizations who participated in each industry average EPD. A transparency report consists of 3 pages. Again, they're web pages, so sometimes they're long, but everything you would want to know about a product and its performance, and its functional performance, as well as environmental performance, access to the specifications, it's all here right on the front page, just like a great brochure. And then page 2 has all of the technical information required to be in an EPD, and page 3 tells the stories about what the manufacturer is actually doing in each life cycle stage that is generating impacts or driving improvements in the life cycle impacts in that particular stage. Polycor was one of the participating members in each of the industry-wide EPDs, and then went on to create product-specific transparency reports. And because their data was included in the industry average EPDs, it was simple to complete product-specific LCAs with the data they'd already provided, and to create product-specific transparency reports. And because they participated in the industry average EPD, the transparency report, we were able to create an optimized transparency report / EPD for Polycor limestone facades, cladding, and walls, because that the improvements that they showed met the criteria, the lead EPD option 2 criteria for optimized, and they were quickly able to get an extra valuable EPD from participating in the industry average, because their product-specific results were compared to the industry average. All of the industry associations who have industry average EPDs in their transparency catalog listing, and that's independent of whether we created the EPD or not, we link to all of the organizations who participated in creating the industry average disclosures, and then we create listings in the catalog for each of those manufacturers. So when people are searching in a particular master format section for products with EPDs, all of those participating manufacturers will show up, because they can use the industry average EPD for their products and get their products into high performance building projects. So we have a pretty sophisticated data strategy, the way we make data available based on the way people are looking for products. But really our intent is to make technical data from EPDs and material disclosures understandable and usable, so that people can make better decisions. And we like to say it's critical in today's market to make the information easy to understand and use and not just easy to find. And so into the transparency catalog, we've built filters where people can filter by embodied carbon, disclosure values. We get data from the EC3 tool where we can identify the comparative results as calculated and displayed in EC3 and assign that value to that EPD, so people in any master format section can simply filter by section and carbon intensity if they care. And we've done the same with the material disclosures. Not only can you find all products with HPDs or declare labels or the cradle, you can filter by the results attribute or level that meet the criteria for the project that you're working on. And so people can apply any of the criteria in any master format section and combine. I'm looking for products in division 7 in the lowest 20th or 40th percentile of embodied carbon, and I want a red list free declare label. And literally in seconds, you're going to get the results that have just those products with just those attributes. So please visit the Natural Stone listing in the transparency catalog. They've got those 3 industry average EPDs, and those products, Natural Stone can be used in many applications, and so those EPDs show up not only in 3 master format divisions, but in many master format sections. You're going to hear from Erin today talking about the HPDs for copper alloys that they have created and their listing. And this just, what you're seeing here is their listing expanded. This is what it looks like closed. They've got products in 14 master format sections, and I didn't even count, 14 master format divisions. Sorry, I need to correct that. And I didn't even count the number of sections that they have identified that copper is used in a range of products. And PIMA has 3 industry average EPDs for roof insulation boards, wall insulation boards, and HD roof cover boards. And Justin will be talking about the new ones that they're very close to publishing, and their listing will be updated with those current industry average EPDs as soon as they are published. So with that, Sarah, over to you, and tell us about what's happening at NSI today.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Terry, and thank you to you and your team for hosting this webinar. I'm really glad to be here today. I'll share a little bit more about myself. I've been in the natural stone industry for 24 years. Dates me a little bit, but I'm okay with that, I guess. And in my early career, I was working directly with a countertop fabricator, a couple of different ones in my early career, before I started freelancing for other organizations in the industry, including 3 different trade associations, some quarriers, some distributors, some other countertop fabricators. So I've had a pretty wide perspective of the industry as a whole. And since about 2012, maybe a little before that, I became a pretty strong sustainability advocate for natural stone, first within our industry, and then as I learned more, identified the need to bring that awareness outside of our industry to the design community. I started doing what I could to create those pathways for myself and start to build that awareness for natural stone. Officially, I'm marketing director and also sustainability manager for Natural Stone Institute. And a little more about the Natural Stone Institute. We are what we would call champions for natural stone, and not just natural stone, but for the natural stone community as well. We're very passionate about the material, about the innovative practices within the industry. We work hard to elevate our industry standards, facilitate growth for the natural stone product and for our member companies, and increase worker skills, health, and safety. Also, we encourage architects and designers to make natural stone their preferred building material by providing the technical resources, design inspiration, and also connections to qualified craftspeople that are our members, like quarriers, fabricators, installers, maintenance and restoration professionals, and etc. And so we get into the guts of what I want to share with you today, starting with global trends in product transparency. I apologize for my technical difficulties. I've gone a little too far. I want to start with EPDs. So EuroRock published an industry-wide EPD in Europe in 2014. And that was the first industry-wide EPD that I saw for natural stone. We then published, the Natural Stone Institute published a set of 3 industry-wide EPDs for North America. That was in 2022, and Terry talked a little bit about that. There was one for flooring, one for cladding, and one for countertops. In 2024, Italy published an industry-wide LCA, and we're working right now to develop a global EPD initiative where there's several countries who will each create their own industry-wide EPD, and then we'll assemble them into a report. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, so I don't want to get into too much detail with it right now. But just to give an overall, we do have strengths in that we have several industry-wide EPDs that cover major product categories, but there's this gap in brand-specific or project-specific EPDs. There's just not a lot of them out there. And I'll explain why in a couple of slides. Terry did share a little more about Polycore. They are one of the organizations in our industry that went forward with the product-specific EPDs. So they're not non-existent. There's just not a lot out there. I wish that we could get more in motion. And the next topic that I have is multi-attribute standards, the Natural Stone Sustainability Standard, and also there's a credential called the Ethical Stone Register. Both were originally published around 2014. Both have collaborated individually and then also together to make sure that these standards stay relevant and that we work to find as many companies to certify to these credentials as we can. But the sustainability standard is strong, it's credible, we've kept it up to date, it's relevant within the market. It covers all of the major buckets that Mindful Materials is working to rally the industry around, including environmental, ecological, human health, and social metrics. Where the gap is the uptake is relatively small outside of North America and the European Union. So within Europe, there's quite a lot of quarriers that are credentialed to the Ethical Stone Register. And here in North America, we've got a good percentage, about 80% of the market that is certified to the sustainability standard. So inside of those areas is good, but outside is not so good. And we, of course, are a very global industry. And so we have some work to do to get some more companies to certify outside of these 2 areas. Next up is material ingredient reports. A couple of our members have declare labels. We've got about 4 of them, maybe 5, that have HPDs that have utilized our templates. So we worked with the HPD collaborative. I'll share a little bit more about that to create templates. Erin's going to talk a little bit about how she's worked with the HPD collaborative as well on her side with copper. But the HPDC has been a really great partner of ours to help to have more of those material ingredient reports out there. One favorable thing that we consider a strength within this realm of material ingredient reports is natural stone has a favorable profile due to its natural composition. There's no VOCs, it's inherently non-emitting, so that's a good story to tell in these reports. It's also, fairly straightforward document for natural stone because we are a single ingredient material. There's not a lot of other manufacturers and raw materials that we need to track down. It's pretty straightforward. The gap, we do have some available, but it's not yet widespread. So I'm working hard to get more companies to publish these documents. Because like I mentioned, and as you can imagine, it is a fairly straightforward document and simple for our quarriers to produce. We just need to get them to click a few buttons, right? So I promised you a little bit more information about what I think is the problem with why we have not a lot of uptake with this standard with the EPDs, product-specific EPDs and the material ingredient reports. And that's simply that producers are ready. I think I've prepped them in understanding the need for this documentation, but what they keep coming back to me and saying is, yeah, Sarah, I trust you, but I trust you that it's coming, but nobody's asking me for it yet. And so what really is needed to change that mentality and get people actually in motion is to get some more people to start asking the manufacturers for them. You know, if it is a priority in your project and you're not seeing any EPDs for natural stone, you're not seeing credentialed sustainability standard holders, just ask them for it, and that will give them the push they need to move forward, because we have a lot of them in this sort of waiting room area where they're ready to go, they know what their next steps are because I've educated them on that, and as soon as they start getting people asking them for these, they'll start publishing them. So I could use a little bit of your help to get to that next level. And I did create a simple graphic to showcase that story that I just shared. I would say that we're on step 2. We've heard the clear signals, we've published industry-wide reports, but unfortunately just a little bit stuck there. We need more specifiers requesting the documentation and also confirming when product selection was influenced by those currently published documents before we can get to step 4, which is to have significant growth in the number of product-specific transparency documents. On to tariffs. So, gosh, this is a very important thing for our industry. We are a global industry. About 85% of natural stone used in the US is imported. And so about 15% is quarried here domestically. Yes, there is some opportunity to increase domestic production and use more of that material here in the US, but there's a lot of varieties of stone and a lot of preferred colors that simply are not available here in the US. So that is an important factor to consider. We are very concerned with the tariffs. There was a recent one adding a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports, which is a very large importer currently, particularly within the countertop market. I was actually just at a conference this week with some other building material trade associations, and there was 4 of the 5 that we normally meet at this show that were not there at this conference. And the reason that they weren't there is because they're in DC and they're lobbying to try to advocate for fair trade policies. So the Natural Stone Institute, along with other trade associations in our industry, has taken a public stance that we call for open, fair, and free trade. And we are actively lobbying to try to be heard and to sway some of this, because as I mentioned, it's simply not possible to create more factories here in the US to produce this stone, because the stone that's being requested within the market often comes from outside of the US. All right, and now I slide too soon, but we want to talk a little bit more about HPDs and EPDs and also PCRs. So in 2024, last year, we worked with the HPDC. And what we did with them was we developed templates for different types of natural stone to make it easier for quarriers to publish these material ingredient reports. So instead of having to start from scratch and create a whole HPD, they now can use our HPD templates, and then they can just customize a certain set of fields, which we've given them guidance to do, and then push the publish button and they're done. So very easy. I appreciate working with the HPDC to make that easier for our members. We also published 3 industry-wide EPDs. Sustainable Mines was our program operator for those, as Terry mentioned earlier. And with the flooring PCR particularly, that we needed to create that flooring EPD, there was a little problem with that, in that it wasn't actually for all flooring. It specifically excluded natural stone. And the reason for that was during that initial development, there wasn't anybody from the Natural Stone Institute on that committee. And so unfortunately, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So we fell victim to that. And now we are at the table and making sure that natural stone is a part of that as it's being redeployed. UL is leading that effort and we're part of that committee. We're also working together on a PCR for this global EPD initiative, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. But we are very active with all three of these types of documentation, the HPDs, EPDs, and PCRs. So for the global EPD initiative, this is really exciting. Thanks to our experience with those industry-wide EPDs and our experience with this flooring PCR committee, we, as Natural Stone Institute, were well positioned to lead this global EPD initiative to align our entire global industry around the importance of transparency. And you can see several of the organizations that are involved with this. But all of these countries are going to be developing their own industry-wide EPDs, and then we'll assemble them into a single report to tell this larger story of how natural stone, what the impacts are and what the opportunities are within the design community to utilize more natural stone in building projects. We're hoping to have the final report, which will tell that story by the end of 2026. So a very exciting project. I hope you're watching out for that. We also have our, I feel like I'm talking a little slow, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with my technology. I apologize for that. Multi-attribute industry credential, that's our sustainability standard. I mentioned before it was published in 2014. It's gone through 4 significant updates. Those are not easy, but we want to make sure that it's relevant in this ever-changing building market. We're currently working on reframing how we talk about the standard to make sure that it aligns with the Mindful Materials, Common Materials framework. So that's really rallying the industry around, talking about sustainability in a more holistic fashion and with common terminology. And those buckets are being fed into the recent lead updates. So we're paying a lot of attention to that. Another thing that we're working on is education. One of the core competencies of the Natural Stone Institute is education, and it's really the driver behind a lot of what we do day to day. So we stay up to date on industry challenges, opportunities. We deliver that relevant education to our stakeholders, from couriers to architects, and both on webinars, virtually, and live at trade shows. So that is something that we are consistently working on as well. And I want to just take a second. I like to share a slide like this just to really hit home how crucial it is that we all remember why this is all important. Saving the planet and little guys like this one in the picture, the next generation and beyond. Quantifying impacts, defining ethical supply chains, comparing one material to the other. It only really matters if we apply it to these larger goals. So I'm going to leave you with one final slide that really explains how we can work towards this together in decarbonizing the building materials environment. When we talk about reducing embodied carbon, design teams typically are focusing on optimizing materials within a category. So for example, precast concrete, you might reduce cement content, use alternative binders like fly ash, or improve curing processes. And that's all important. And that can potentially move you from that red bar to that orange bar, right? From the worst of the worst to the best of the worst. But the bigger opportunity is to step back and ask, is there a lower carbon category that still meets your project's needs? And that's where natural stone shines. If you move from a high carbon category like precast concrete to natural stone, you've already shifted into this drastically lower carbon range. And here's the key point. Even the worst of the best, so even the highest carbon natural stone, is still really good when you compare it to the best of the worst category. in this example, being concrete. I'm not suggesting they're the worst of the worst, but we know from research that they're definitely up there. So I just wanted to share that example. This strategy can be applied to other product categories as well, but I encourage these design teams to really look past within your product category and start thinking throughout other categories. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was an excellent point to leave on as we transition over to Justin.
Great, thank you, Terry. Good to be with everyone. So from beautiful stone to insulation, the workhorse of energy efficiency. Happy to fill in for my colleague Marcin today. Let's see here, go to the next slide. Just a little bit about myself. I've been with Pima since 2017. For the past 15 years, I've been in and around the building products and polyurethanes industry. While I do not have a technical background, given the products I've worked with and the issues that we've worked on, a lot of that has revolved around driving sustainability. So eager to share with you a couple things that the industry is working on currently and highlight a couple of trends, both from a building products perspective, but also trends that the AEC community is participating in. One of the things that drives interest personally for me in sustainability is really the opportunity for data to help drive better understanding, better decision making, and better outcomes, and really why I am and our industry is passionate about transparency. So who is Pima? We are the Association for North American Manufacturers of Polyisocyanurate Insulation. Kind of one of those products, hard to pronounce, may have never heard about it before, but I challenge you to find a building that doesn't use polyiso. We're the most popular product used in commercial low slope roofing. So most buildings that you walk into on a day-to-day basis, typically polyiso is over your head, saving energy. We're also used as a continuous insulation for commercial, institutional, industrial, and residential buildings on walls and below grade. And a lot of associations have a great story to tell on sustainability. Sustainability is really at the core of who Pima is. The industry association was originally formed back in the late 80s to help the industry navigate through the phase out of ozone depleting substances that were used in our manufacturing processes. So the industry got together as a kind of a research consortium to identify and validate substitute chemicals. And we have been able to continue that focus on sustainability throughout our organization's history, whether that be the advocacy work that we do around sustainable construction and energy efficiency, or to the topics we'll talk about today, which is transparency reporting. I'm going to kind of focus on 4 topics. 1, why are we talking about transparency? 2, what is the polyiso industry doing? 3, what are some unique considerations when talking about sustainability and insulation products? And then hit on about 3 trends that are driving action both at the manufacturer level as well as at the AEC level. So why are we talking about product transparency? I always like to kind of level set with these couple of slides. The built environment, when you look at both building operations as well as the materials that we use, are responsible for roughly 42%, according to this source, of global emissions. So if we are looking at a global scale to reduce CO2 emissions, buildings, and more so the products we use to make those buildings, have to be part of that discussion. And why are we focused on building materials more and more these days? When we look into the future, the expectation is the sources that we get our energy from, our electricity from, will become cleaner and cleaner. Today, if you look at a typical building and its carbon footprint over its life cycle, we can estimate that 25% of that building's carbon footprint are due to the materials we use to originally construct and maintain it. 75% are attributed to the operational phase. Fast forward over the coming decades, we expect that to be a more equal split, 50-50. So 50% of a building's footprint will be embodied carbon, 50% will be associated with its operational phase. So of course, if we want to continue to make progress, and we've come a tremendous amount of a tremendous way in the last decades of improving our sustainable construction practices, we know that the materials we use are going to have to be a bigger part of the conversation going forward. So what are we doing to participate in that dialogue? Terry highlighted we are quickly approaching the publication date of what will be our third generation of industry average EPDs. I'm sharing here the current EPDs that were published in the fall of 2020. So we will, before the end of this year, have new industry average EPDs for roof insulation, wall insulation, each of those covering a variety of different product types within those categories. And then we're really excited. When we published our EPDs back in 2020, we decided that we wanted to lead the roof protection coverboard industry by publishing a report for HD polyiso coverboards. However, at the time, the only PCR that was suitable was the insulation PCR. But we're excited the industry has gotten together. There's now a PCR that covers roof protection coverboards, which is a more appropriate category for HD polyiso. So when we publish our new EPDs this fall, the roof and the wall will be done under the thermal insulation PCR, and the HD coverboard will be published under the roof protection coverboard PCR. And before I move on, I just want to highlight a couple things, and I thought Sarah did a nice job, but industry average, especially as we look into what jurisdictions are doing to create frameworks for regulating embodied carbon, I'm sometimes bothered with how industry average EPDs are discussed in those settings as somehow a lesser transparency reporting tool. And I just want to highlight 3 reasons why I think industry average EPDs are critically important to our shared progress in this area. One, for certain industries, because of resources, because of a highly diversified network of manufacturers, industry average EPDs may be the only practical way to highlight the environmental impacts of a particular industry. Now, the polyiso industry, we're fortunate. We have some manufacturers that are investing in their own EPDs, but the reality is not every industry is situated that way, and industry average EPDs may be the only opportunity to have the transparency data for that particular industry. Second, there are rules around what information can be combined into an industry average EPD, all targeted at driving accurate analysis and accurate results. And third, and we've found this even in our industry, that industry average EPDs provide an opportunity for manufacturers to leverage the information, the knowledge they gain to then pursue their own company, product, facility specific EPDs. So I just want to highlight that I think they're critically important. Sometimes they get shortchanged a little bit in their value in the discussion. I had mentioned PCRs. Over the past 2 years, we've been working to update the PCR for building envelope thermal insulation. This will be the 3rd edition of this particular PCR. The entire industry has come together to drive improvements. I've listed a couple there on the screen. Maybe just to highlight one that's sort of unique to building insulation. A lot of polyiso goes into roofs. We know that during a building's life, it will have multiple roofs. And oftentimes, at least during one of those re-roofing projects, the entire existing roof will be removed and replaced. That historically was not accounted for in certain product EPDs. The polyiso industry has been leading to include roof replacements in reported EPDs. And I'm happy to say that the new PCR will require products that are used to insulate roofs to contemplate and factor in the environmental impacts of having to replace a roof during the building's 75-year service life. So just one small example of how the industry continues to drive for more transparency and improved accuracy in this area. Now, I mentioned insulation is sort of unique among products. We primarily use insulation to reduce operational impacts. This creates the opportunity to factor kind of what we call a payback of insulation. There are a number of really great reports that the insulation industry has prepared. We have them available on polyiso.org. What I want to highlight here real quickly, we did some analysis trying to figure out what are the savings associated with a unit of insulation across commercial building types under a number of different electrification scenarios. So If you believe we're quickly on the way to electrification, scenario 2 with 100% heat pump transition might be the information that you want to look at. If you believe we're going to make that electrification transition on a much slower time scale, you might favor scenario 1, which is looking at existing heating systems. So I think a really thorough analysis, a lot of food for thought here, but highlighted in both of the scenarios in yellow is the average. And this number represents the GHG savings per functional unit that we use in the insulation industry. So just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude of savings, a typical polyiso roof insulation board in its functional unit for insulation has a GWP of approximately 4.3. If you look at scenario 1 and in climate zone, say 5A, over the useful life of that product in a building, it has the potential to save 1,208 GHG per functional unit. So a tremendous amount of payback and savings on insulation. And this will be important as we get into a couple of the trends that I see coming our way. Okay, so really, what are some trends in our industry and across the insulation industry? We're working hard to meet the demand for more transparency and more specificity of transparency. I talked about what we're doing. Our manufacturers are looking at ways to develop product-specific EPDs. I'm happy to report in this latest edition of the industry work, we have more and more manufacturers leveraging that work to produce their own company-specific EPDs. So we hear the demand and we're working quickly to meet that demand. It's not just manufacturers, a little bit different than, of course, natural stone. Polyiso has a fairly large and sophisticated upstream value chain. We have raw material suppliers that are working to develop specific life cycle inventory data for their products so that we have accurate information on the inputs that we're using, and we don't have to rely on more generalized databases or surrogate data. And really this drive towards measuring and reporting is also creating the demand for improvements in those materials. So we see a lot coming down the pipeline in terms of investments in improving the raw materials that our manufacturers utilize to produce polyiso. So really excited for the next 5 or 10 years as we see more and more of those sustainable options come to market. In terms of the importance of product transparency, we are certainly part of the growing dialogue around how to use product transparency appropriately in the building and construction industry from a regulatory standpoint. We're really excited about the opportunities around whole building life cycle assessment for the reasons I highlighted a few slides ago. The opportunity that insulation provides to reduce operational impacts, you can really only take that into consideration if you're doing a whole building life cycle assessment. So when we get the opportunity to talk with regulators or with design professionals, we're really encouraging them to look more seriously at opportunities around whole building life cycle assessments, rather than just establishing, in some cases, arbitrary GWP limits for certain product categories. We want to preserve design professionals' flexibility in designing buildings, and we think whole building life cycle assessments are the best way to accomplish that. And then my last slide, sort of a call to action for what the AEC community can do. We need to continue to expand the number of product categories that are covered by transparency reports. Moving into bullet point 2, this is really the only way that whole building life cycle assessment works, is if we have a sufficient amount of building products covered. So we've done a lot, we continue to do more, but there's a lot of work left to be done. And as we kind of race to cover more products under transparency reports, I think the AEC community has an important role to play in ensuring and demanding that those reports are prepared in accordance with industry accepted standards and practices. We need a reasonable level of confidence that everyone is following the same rules in performing the analysis and reporting the results of those analyses. So that's my last slide, turning it over to Erin.
Thank you, Justin. That was a great story about what you guys are doing and have been doing. So really appreciate you moving your industry forward. So over to Erin.
Thanks, Terry, for having me again on this wonderful series. I'm excited to be here to continue to tell others about our copper story. So I'm Erin Smith. I'm the Deputy Director of Environmental Health and Safety and Recycling at the Copper Development Association. All right, a little bit about me. I have a background in environmental science. I went to the Cleveland State University for my undergraduate and the University of Colorado in Denver for my graduate degree. Spent a lot of time as an aquatic ecologist, so that's my background. And now in my professional career, I am a woman of many hats. I do environmental health and safety work, which includes both the physical environment as well as occupational settings. And within my new role, I manage raw materials. So you can think of that as a scrap and recycling. I've taken a lot of different paths in my career, and one thing I've learned is that success really comes from having a mix of experiences and perspectives. Curiosity has a way of opening doors you didn't even know were there. And meeting new people, building those connections can take you to new places you've never imagined. We've been on this webinar, we heard from Sarah and Justin about all the really awesome things they're doing in their industry. And hearing what they do can inspire us to do, great and new, effective, streamlined, and meaningful things. So a little bit about the Copper Development Association. CDA is a not-for-profit trade association representing the North American copper industry, and we've been around about a little over 60 years. Our membership represents about 70% of the U.S. copper mining capacity and 90% of the U.S. fabrication capacity, which includes copper and brass mills that make products like sheet, strip, plate, tubes, rods, wires, cables, bus bars, and beyond. Our mission is bringing the value of copper and copper alloys to society to address the challenges of today and tomorrow. We do this by mobilizing our membership to identify and prioritize market challenges and opportunities that are impacting the flow of metal to market. So today I'll be focusing on the sustainability aspect in the form of product transparency, and I'll be giving a little bit of some information regarding recent tariffs. So, global trends in the copper product transparency industry. Right now, we are working, sorry, my slides are also not advancing. There we go. Where are we right now in our journey? Well, we're still collecting a lot of data. We're really trying to understand what is being asked of our membership and why. That way we can really get into the details and provide those people asking those questions, such as AECOs, the best available answers. Where are we in this journey? As a whole industry, we're kind of a little bit all over the place. Some of us are at the beginning stages, really understanding these questions, what's being asked of them, and then we do have leaders in this space as well. Currently, we have a few new initiatives at the Copper Development Association. First and foremost, we're working on carbon accounting. We've heard a little bit about that today in different aspects, and we're working towards streamlining that process. In addition, we're working on recycled content guidance, and that means looking at the boundary conditions and what qualifies as recycled content. That way, when you are looking for those sustainability claims, you can know that if you ask customer A and customer B what their recycled content claims are, you'll get the same answer, apples to apples. And then finally, new initiatives in product transparency. So building on the webinar that Marcin from PIMA and I were on just a couple of years ago. The screen is blank. There we go. A couple of years ago. All right, so let's move on. Apologies for that. So let's talk about tariffs for just a moment. So in March of 2023, or March of this year, a Section 232 investigation was initiated. This is defined by the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and is a U.S. Department of Commerce investigation into the effects of imports on national security. Specifically, the investigation assesses whether the imports in question are occurring in quantities or under circumstances that could potentially impair national security. There are roughly 4 steps in this investigation. So first, there's an initiation. This can be done by the Secretary of Commerce or through requests from other government agencies or interested parties. The scope is to determine if there is a threat to national security, whether that importation of a specific product and its derivatives is happening in such a way that could threaten that national security. The Secretary of Commerce then prepares a report to the President, outline whether there is a threat to national security and recommended actions to address it. Once the President receives that report, he can take action. He has 90 days to decide whether to take action based on the report's findings, which could include tariffs, quotas, or other measures. President Trump's actions can be found at whitehouse.gov, although I will give a high-level overview of what those look like in just a moment. So who will be impacted? Honestly, the entire value chain is impacted, both domestically and globally. It's truly dependent on where you are both physically and within the value chain itself. For the 232 investigation, CDA submitted public comments that are available on the Federal Register on behalf of our fabricator members. These comments outline the challenges and opportunities facing the industry. We proposed a holistic package with these comments from top to bottom solutions. Honestly, times are still evolving daily, and there are protections for our mid and downstream members. However, upstream solutions are still to be determined. So specifically, on July 30th of this year, recommendations from the 232 report led President Trump to initiate a variety of measures. This includes 50% tariffs on imports of semi-finished copper products, such as copper pipes, wires, rods, sheets, and tubes, and copper-intensive derivative products, such as pipe fittings, cables, connectors, and other electrical components. Copper input materials, such as copper ores, concentrates, mats, cathodes, and anodes, and copper scrap are not subject to the 232 or reciprocal tariffs at this time. 25% of high-quality copper scrap produced in the United States is to be sold within the United States. Commerce also recommended an exporting licensing requirement for high-quality copper scrap to ensure adequate domestic supply. Finally, 25% of copper input materials, such as copper ores, concentrates, mats, cathodes, and anodes produced in the United States are to be sold within the United States, starting in 2027. It will increase to 30% in 2028 and 40% in 2029. Questions on impacts to sustainability and transparency are still to be determined. However, this is a good segue to why we're all here, to talk about continued transparency initiatives in the copper industry, specifically around health product declarations and new innovations and continued collaborations. And wrapping up by connecting how this might impact you. Okay, so as I mentioned, I was on this lovely webinar a couple of years ago talking about how the Copper Development Association and our partnership through HVADC moved this initiative forward for us. So as a trade organization, we are not producers of products, so technically we really can't have HPDs or product HPDs. But with some big brains, we came together and thought, there are international standards that require and specify certain alloys to be used in certain products. So the example I have here is under ASTM, if you are going to be making or using copper water tube type K, L, or M per ASTM standard B88, you must use one of two alloys, C122 or C120. Now, the chemical composition of alloys is also defined, and therefore we can use those alloy compositions to create these industry standard-based HPDs. So to take this one step further, we continued our work with HPDC. And began thinking of new ways to, get this information out to people who need it. So with this close collaboration with Wendy Vittori and Corey White, we developed the Metal Trade Association's Metal Alloy HPD Best Practice. Because we are the authoritative figure on alloy composition, we can move these HPDs forward. Overall, HPDC is looking to metal trade associations to assist manufacturers by providing product HPDs for applicable metal alloying elements. The goal of this is to collaborate and provide a more accurate content inventory, provide a more accurate hazard assessment of the metal alloys themselves, and to utilize the availability of industry-specific inventory and classification systems. So when people are putting alloys in their products and then, disclosing that information, it is widely variable across the HPD space. So we're really trying to make sure that reporting is clear, concise, and accurate across when it is reported. Currently, we started small with 13 alloy HPDs. The example here illustrates what these look like. We had them all third-party verified as well. In the previous slide, I pointed out that if you are using type KLM water tube, you must use one of these two types of copper alloys, C120 or C122. So we use those to then develop and renew our standard-based HPDs. So taking it to the next level, there we go. Oh. There's a wealth of information over at HPDC's website, and since we don't have a lot of time to dive into all the details of how we did this, I provided here how to navigate to the alloy HPD section of the HPD's website. So you can find that open standard, look under best practices, find the metal alloy trade associations in HPDs, and then you will find another webinar by me and Alex Coe from WAP explaining the whole process on how we did this. So we took action, as I mentioned, when renewing our standard-based HPDs, we nested the alloys right back in. So you can check out on Sustainable Minds website how we did this by clicking on any one of our standards. So moving on and how we're going to the next level, we have a call to action as well for other trade organizations with alloys. How can you get more involved? Lean in and reach out as a community, ask questions to see how industries like aluminum and steel and even copper can make product transparency easier for you when you have complex products with alloys. Making those connections, through things like this webinar, so people can see what we're doing as the copper industry and other industries that make alloys or are the authoritative figure on those alloys can come together and continue to build on that range of experiences and perspectives so we can, move all these initiatives forward. We're here to shine a light on what's going on to our buildings. So, my first two panelists talked about, using EPDs, life cycle inventories, assurance frameworks, and I've been speaking to health product declarations to expand what we know and how to sharpen how we work and the power of the growth of a greener and healthier building industry. Whoa. Finally, HPDC is making this even easier for you with the new HPD Builder interface to produce compliant documents easily and quickly. The new interface, if you are using copper alloys that have an HPD, you can now use a nesting format, choosing it right from the list. This is a really cool and innovative feature. Currently, we only have 13 copper alloy HPDs, and there are over 700 registered alloys. We understand that not every alloy will need an HPD. However, we are looking to expand the list and can use input from the community. Are you using alloys in your products? And how can we help you develop those HPDs to make reporting even easier than you? On a global context, HPDs are expanding to the EU. This is coming soon, and a preview will be here in the next few weeks. Big changes are EC numbers can now be screened in the HPD builder through Veros, just like CAS numbers. The EU, there will only be 3 lists that will show up on the EU HPD, which is the EU SVHC list, ChemSec SIN list, the EU GHS H statements list, and physical hazards will remove. So I think we're running out of time. So how can you get involved? Ask questions, don't miss out. If you have any questions for me on what we're doing in the sustainability space, please let me know. We can go to the last slide, Terry. Finally, we're launching a new campaign, Copper the Continuous Cycle. We'd love for you to get involved and hear all the great sustainability message we are talking about. and what you're looking for in your products. You can discover more at copper.org, that's continuing cycle, and you can follow us on LinkedIn to get more information. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Erin, and thanks to all three of our guests today sharing the advocacy and leadership work happening at each of their organizations to help their members and us transform the built environment. So thank you everyone for attending. I wish you a great day, and on your way out, if you don't mind leaving comments about the webinar and any questions you had that you'd like some follow-up, please leave those. And we look forward to having you at the next webinar coming up next month. Have a great day, and thanks again.